Hi, ninth graders. I cannot believe we are almost done with this book. This is Coconuts. We are on chapter 9. So please open to page 111 and follow along with me for chapter 9. Boxer's split hoof was a long time in healing. They had started the rebuilding of the windmill the day after the victory celebrations were ended. Boxer refused to take even a day off work and made it a point of honor not to let it be seen that he was in pain. In the evenings, he would admit privately to Clover that his hoof troubled him a great deal. Clover treated the hoof with poultice of herbs as she prepared by chewing them, and both she and Benjamin urged Boxer to work less hard. A horse's lungs do not last forever. He had, he said, only one real ambition left, to see the windmill well underway before he reached the age for retirement. At the beginning, when the laws of the animal farm were first formulated, the retiring age had been fixed for horses and pigs at 12, for cows at 14, for dogs at 9, for sheep at 7, for hens and geese at 5. Liberal old age pensions had been agreed upon. As yet, no animal had actually retired on pension, but of late the subject had been discussed more and more. Now that small field beyond the orchard that had been set aside for barley, it was rumored that a corner of the large pasture was to be fenced off and turned into a grazing ground for superannuated animals. For a horse, it was said the pension would be 5 pounds of corn a day, and in the winter 15 pounds of hay, with a carrot or possibly an apple on public holidays. Boxer's 12th birthday was due in late summer of the following year. Meanwhile, life was hard. The winter was cold, as the last one had been, and food was even shorter. Once again, all the rations were reduced, except for the pigs and the dogs. A too rigid equality in rations, Squealer explained, would have been contrary to the principles of animalism. In any case, he had no difficulty in proving to the other animals that they were not in reality short of food, whatever the appearances might be. For the time being, certainly, it had been found necessary to make a readjustment of rations. Squealer always spoke of it as a readjustment, not a reduction. Clever Squealer. But in comparison with the days of Jones, the improvement was enormous. Reading out the figures in a shrill, rapid voice, he proved to them in detail that they had more oats and more hay and more turnips than any other in Jones' day, that they worked shorter hours and that their drinking water was better quality and that they lived longer, that a larger proportion of their younger ones survived infancy, and that they had more straw in their stalls and suffered less from fleas. The animals believed every word of it. Oh, that's good propaganda. Truth to tell, Jones all he stood for had almost faded out from their memories. They knew that life nowadays was harsh and bare, that they often were hungry and often cold, and that they usually were working when they were not asleep. But doubtless it had been worse in the old days. They were glad to believe so. Besides, in those days, they had been slaves, and now they were free, and that made all the difference, as Squealer did not fail to point out. There were many more mouths to feed now. In autumn, the 4 sows had littered about, simultaneously producing 31 young pigs between them. The young pigs were piebald, and as Napoleon was the only boar on the farm, it was possible to guess their parentage. It was announced that later, when bricks and timber had been purchased, a schoolroom would be built in the farmhouse garden. For the time being, the young pigs were given their instructions by Napoleon himself in the farm kitchen. They took their exercise in the garden. They were discouraged from playing with the other young animals. About this time, too, it was laid down as a rule that when a pig and any other animal met on a path, the other animal must stand aside, and also that all pigs of whatever degree were to have the privilege of wearing green ribbons on their tails on Sundays. We're starting to see a segregation here, a very clear segregation. I mean, we were seeing it before with the rations, that the pigs were sleeping in the house, that they were sleeping in beds. And now we have pigs, the kids, these baby piglets, they're getting an education when the other animals aren't. And now they get to wear ribbons and people have to move aside when they come. So we see this segregated society, but we also see a hierarchical society with the pigs being on top, which is directly conflicting with the original rules of animalism, where everybody is equal. And my friends, this is a government class, this is directly conflicting with the ideals of what socialism was originally. Karl Marx's socialism was originally supposed to be about. The farm had a fairly successful year, but was still short of money. There were the bricks, the sand, the lime for the schoolroom to be purchased, and it was also to be necessary to begin saving up for the machinery for the windmill. There were lamp oil, candles for the house, sugar for Napoleon's own table. He forbade this to the other pigs on the grounds that it made them fat. Guess it was okay for him to have it and be fat. All of the usual replacements such as tools, nails, string, coal, wire, scrap iron, and dog biscuits. A stump of hay and part of a potato crop were sold off, and the contract for the eggs was increased to 600 a week, so that the year the hens barely hatched enough chicks to keep their numbers at the same level. Rations were reduced in December, reduced again in February, and lanterns in the stalls were forbidden to save oil. But the pigs seemed comfortable enough, and in fact were putting on weight, if anything. One afternoon in late February, a warm, rich, appetizing scent, such as the animals had never smelt before, wafted itself across the yard from the little brew house, which had been disused in Joan's time, and which stood beyond the kitchen. Someone said it was the smell of cooking barley. The animals sniffed the air hungrily and wondered whether a warm mash was being prepared for their supper. But no warm mash appeared, and the following Sunday it was announced that from now onwards all barley would be reserved for the pigs. The field beyond the orchard had already been sown with barley, and the news leaked out that the pigs were now receiving a ration of a pint beer daily, with a half-gallon of Napoleon himself, which was always served to him in the Crown Derby soup tourney. If there were hardships to be borne, they were partly offset by the fact that life nowadays had a greater dignity than it had before. There were more songs, more speeches, more processions. Very indicative of a government who is trying to sell to the people that their way is right. Speeches, processions, songs, keep the morale, keep the people believing that this is a good thing. Napoleon had commanded that once a week there should be something called a spontaneous demonstration, the object of which was to celebrate the struggles and triumphs of Animal Farm. Ooh, spontaneous demonstration. There's definitely a question on your guide about this. At the appointed time, the animals would leave their work and march round the precincts of the farm in a military formation, with the pigs leading them. The horses, then the cows, then the sheep, then the poultry. The dogs flanked the procession, and at the head of it all, of course, marched Napoleon's black cockerel. Boxer and Clover also carried between them a green banner marked with the hoof and the horn and the caption, "Long live Comrade Napoleon." Afterwards, there were recitations of poems composed in Napoleon's honor and a speech by Squealer giving the particulars of the latest increases in the productions of foodstuff, and on occasion a shot was fired from a gun. The sheep were the greatest devotees of the spontaneous demonstration, and if anyone complained, as a few animals sometimes did when no pigs or dogs were near, that they wasted their time and meant a lot of standing about in the cold, the sheep were sure to silence them with their tremendous bleating of, you guessed it, 4 legs good, 2 legs bad. But by and large, the animals enjoyed these celebrations. They found it comforting to be reminded that after all, they were truly their own masters and the work they did was for their own benefit. So that with the songs and the procession, Squealer's list of figures, and the thunder of a gun, and the crowing of a cockerel, and the fluttering of the flag, they were able to forget that their bellies were empty, at least part of the time. In April, Animal Farm was proclaimed a republic, and it became necessary to elect a president. Really? A republic? A democracy? Let's see. There was only one candidate, Napoleon, who was elected unanimously. On the same day, it was given out that fresh documents had been discovered which revealed further details about Snowball's complacency with Jones. It now appeared that Snowball had not, as the animals had previously imagined, merely attempted to lose the Battle of Cowshed by means of stratagem, but had been openly fighting on Jones's side. In fact, he was the one who had actually been the leader of the human forces, and had charged into battle with the words, "Long live humanity," on his lips. The wounds on Snowball's back, which a few animals still remembered to have seen, had been inflicted by Napoleon's teeth. Rewriting history. In the middle of the summer, Moses the raven suddenly reappeared on the farm after an absence of several years. He was quite unchanged, still did no work, and talked about the same strain as ever about Sugar Candy Mountain. He would perch on a stump, flap his wings, and talk by the hour to anyone who would listen. "Up there, comrades," he would say solemnly, pointing to the sky with his large beak. "Up there, just on the other side of that dark cloud, you can see it. There lies Sugar Candy Mountain, the happy country where we poor animals shall rest forever from our labors." He even claimed to have been there on one of his higher flights and seen everlasting fields of clover and linseed cake and the lump sugar growing on hedges. Many of the animals believed him. Their lives, now reasoned, were hungry and laborious, was not right, and that it was just a better world should exist somewhere else. And the thing was difficult to determine the attitude of the pigs towards Moses. They all declared contemptuously that his stories about Sugar Candy Mountain were lies, and yet they allowed him to remain on the farm, not working, with an allowance of a gill of a beer a day. After his hoof had healed up, Boxer worked harder than ever. Indeed, all the animals worked like slaves that year, apart from the regular work of the farm and the rebuilding of the windmill. There was a schoolhouse for the young pigs, which started in March. Sometimes the long hours on insufficient food were hard to bear, but Boxer never faltered. In nothing that he said or did was there any sign that his strength was not as it had been. It was only his appearance that was a little altered. His hide was less shiny than it used to be, and his great haunches seemed to have been shrunken. The others said Boxer will pick up when the spring grass comes on. But the spring came on, and Boxer grew no fatter. Sometimes on the slope leading to the top of the quarry, when he braced his muscles against the weight of some vast boulder, it seemed like nothing kept him on his feet except the will to continue. At such times his lips were seen to form the words, "I will work harder." He had no voice left. Once again, Clover and Benjamin warned him to take care of his health, but Boxer paid no attention. His 12th birthday was approaching. He did not care what happened so long as a good store of stone was accumulated before he went on pension. Late one evening in the summer, a sudden rumor ran around the farm that something had happened to Boxer. He had gone out to drag a load of stone down to the windmill, and sure enough, the rumor was true. A few minutes later, 2 pigeons came racing in with the news. Boxer had fallen. He is laying on his side, and he can't get up. Oh no, I don't like this part, you guys. About half the animals on the farm rushed out to the knoll where the windmill stood. There lay Boxer between the shafts of the cart, his neck stretched out, unable to even raise his head. His eyes were glazed, his sides matted with sweat. A thin stream of blood had trickled out of his mouth. Clover dropped to her knees. "Boxer," she cried, "how are you?" "It's my lung," he said in a weak voice. "It does not matter. I think you will be able to finish the windmill without me. There is a pretty good store of stone accumulated. I had only another month to go any case. To tell you the truth, I've been looking forward to my retirement, and perhaps as Benjamin is growing old too, they will let him retire at the same time and be a companion to me." "We must get help at once," said Clover. "Run, somebody, and tell Squealer what happened." All the other animals raced immediately back to the farmhouse to give Squealer the news. Only Clover remained, and Benjamin, who lay down at Boxer's side, and without speaking kept the flies off of him with his long tail. After about a quarter of an hour, Squealer appeared, full of sympathy and concern. He said that Comrade Napoleon had learned with very deepest distress of the misfortune to one of his most loyal workers on the farm, and was already making arrangements to send Boxer to be treated at a hospital in Wellington. The animals felt uneasy at this. Except for Molly and Snowball, no other animal had left the farm, and they did not think of their of their sick comrade, and they did not like to think of their sick comrade in the hands of human beings. However, Squealer, of course, easily convinced them that the veterinarian surgeon in Wellington could treat Boxer's case more satisfactory than could be done on the farm. And about a half an hour later, when Boxer had somewhat recovered, he was with great difficulty got to his feet and managed to limp back to his stall, where Clover and Benjamin had prepared a good bed of straw for him. For the next 2 days, Boxer remained in his stall. The pigs had sent out for a large bottle of pink medicine, which they have found in the medicine chest in the bathroom, and Clover had administered it to Boxer twice a day after meals. In the evening, she lay in his stall and talked to him, while Benjamin kept the flies off him. Boxer professed not to be sorry for what happened. If he made a good recovery, he might expect to live another 3 years, and he looked forward to peaceful days that he would spend in the corner of the big pasture. It would be the first time that he had leisure to study and improve his mind. He intended, he said, to devote the rest of his life to learning the remaining 22 letters of the alphabet. However, Benjamin and Clover could only be with Boxer after working hours, and it was in the middle of the day when a van came to take him away. The animals were at work weeding turnips under the supervision of the pigs when they were astonished to see Benjamin coming and galloping from the direction of the farm building, braying at the top of his voice. It was the first time they had ever seen Benjamin excited. Indeed, it was the first time that anyone had seen him gallop. "Quick, quick," he shouted. "Come at once. They're taking Boxer away." Without waiting for orders from the pigs, the animals broke off work and raced to the farm building. Sure enough, there in the yard was a large closed van drawn by 2 horses with the lettering on his slide and a sly-looking man in a low crowned bowler hat sitting on the driver's seat, and Boxer's stall was empty. The animals crowded around the van. "Goodbye, Boxer," they chorused. "Goodbye." "Fools! Fools!" shouted Benjamin, prancing around. "Fools! Do you not see what is written on the side of that van?" This gave the animals pause, and there was a hush. Muriel began to spell out the words, but Benjamin pushed her aside, and in midst of deadly silence, he read, "Alfred Simmons, horse slaughter and glue boiler, Willingdon, dealer in hides and bone meal, kennels supplied." "Do you not understand what that means? They are taking Boxer to the knackers." A cry of horror burst from the animals. All of this moment, the man on the box whipped the horses, and the van moved out of the yard at a smart trot. All the animals followed, crying at the tops of their voices. Clover forced her way to the front. The van began to gather speed. Clover tried her stout limbs to gallop and achieve a canter. "Boxer!" she cried. "Boxer! Boxer! Boxer!" And just at this moment, as though he had heard the uproar outside, Boxer's face, with a white stripe down his nose, appeared at the small window at the back of the van. "Boxer!" cried Clover in a terrible voice. "Boxer, get out! Get out quickly! They're taking you to your death!" All the animals took up the cry, "Get out, Boxer, get out!" But the van was already gathering speed and drawing away from them. It was uncertain whether Boxer had understood what Clover had said, but the moment later his face disappeared from the window, and there was a sound of a tremendous drumming of hooves inside the van. He was trying to kick his way out. The time had been when a few kicks from Boxer's hoofs would have smashed the van to matchwood, but alas, his strength had left him, and in a few moments the sound of drumming hooves grew fainter and died away. In desperation, the animals began appealing to the 2 horses which drew the van to stop. "Comrades, comrades," they shouted, "don't take your brother to his death." But the stupid brutes, too ignorant to realize what was happening, merely set their ears back and quickened their pace. Boxer's face did not appear at the window. Too late, someone thought of racing ahead and shutting the 5-barrel gate, but in another moment the van was through it and rapidly disappearing down the road. Boxer was never seen again. Not my favorite part. 3 days later, it was announced that he had died in the hospital at Willingdon, in spite of everything, receiving every attention that a horse could have. Squealer came to announce the news to the others. He had, he said, been present during Boxer's last hours. "It was the most affecting sight I'd ever seen," said Squealer, lifting his trotter and wiping away a tear. "I was at his bedside at the very last, and at the end, almost too weak to speak, he whispered in my ear his sole sorrow was to have passed on before the windmill was finished. 'Forward, comrades,' he whispered. 'Forward in the name of the rebellion. Long live Animal Farm. Long live Comrade Napoleon. Napoleon is always right.' And those were his very last words, comrade." Here Squealer's demeanor suddenly changed. He fell silent for a moment, and his little eyes darted suspiciously, glances from side to side before he proceeded. "It had come to his knowledge," he said, "that a foolish and wicked rumor had been circulated at the time of Boxer's removal. Some of the animals had noticed the van which took Boxer away marked horse slaughterer, and had actually jumped to the conclusion that Boxer was being sent to the knackers. It was almost unbelievable," said Squealer, "that any animal could be so stupid. Surely," he cried indignantly, whisking his tail and skipping from side to side, "surely they know that their beloved leader, Comrade Napoleon, better than that." But the explanation was really simple. The van had previously been the property of a knacker, and had been bought by a veterinarian surgeon who had not yet painted out the old name. That was how the mistake had arisen. The animals were enormously relieved to hear this, and when Squealer went on to give further graphic details of Boxer's deathbed, the admirable care that he had received, the expensive medicines for which Napoleon had paid without a thought as to the cost, their last doubts disappeared, and the sorrow that they felt for their comrade's death was tempered by the thought that he at least died happy. Napoleon himself appeared at the meeting on the following Sunday morning and pronounced a short oration in Boxer's honor. It had not been possible, he said, to bring back their lamented comrade's remains for interment on the farm, but he had ordered a large wreath to be made from laurels in the farmhouse garden and sent it down to be placed on Boxer's grave. And in a few days' time, the pigs intended to hold a memorial banquet in Boxer's honor. Napoleon ended his speech with a reminder of Boxer's two favorite maxims: "I will work harder," and "Comrade Napoleon is always right." Maxims, he said, which every animal would do well to adopt at his own. On the day appointed for the banquet, a grocer's van drove up in Wellington and delivered a large wooden crate in the farmhouse. That night there was a sound of uproarious singing, which was followed by what sounded like a violent quarrel and ended at 11 o'clock with a tremendous crash of glass. No one stirred in the farmhouse before noon on the following day, and the word went around that from somewhere or another the pigs had acquired the money to buy themselves a case of whiskey.